Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cutting straight through the modern rhetoric and taking an incredible journey. We're going to uncover the true historical texts and ancient stories that, believe it or not, unexpectedly bind the world's major religions together. Let's get right into it.
Okay, see if you can guess this riddle. Imagine an ancient story. You've got a husband whose name ends in AM, and he's exiled far to the south. His wife, her name starts with an S, while she gets taken captive by this incredibly powerful king whose name ends in an N. Oh, and a loyal relative whose name starts with an L travels with them. Now that sounds exactly like the Ramayana, right? You've got Ram, Sita, Lakshman, and the demon king Ravan.
Well, here is the plot twist. What if we replace Ram with Abraham, Sita with Sarah, Lakshman with Lot, and Ravan with the Egyptian pharaoh? You know what happens? Those exact same narrative beats perfectly describe the journey of Prophet Abraham into Egypt. I mean, it is just a staggering historical overlap in our cultural storytelling, and it's been hiding right there in plain sight the whole time.
So why does highlighting this even matter? Well, division often stems from simply not knowing our shared history. When we actually see our own ancient stories reflected in the foundational beliefs of others, it builds the solid, factual framework for mutual understanding. Seriously, it becomes so much harder to view other cultures as entirely alien when you realize that their heroes look exactly like ours.
Okay, the bedrock of this shared history really begins with one major concept: monotheism. Unlike polytheism, this core belief in a single, universal God is literally the vital thread uniting Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, what we often call the Abrahamic religions. And they all trace their spiritual lineage straight back to early figures like Adam, Enoch, and Prophet Abraham, which acts as the foundation for billions of believers today.
And, these ancient connections aren't just limited to a few names. Take a look at our first major universal myth, the Great Flood. In the Abrahamic traditions, you've got Noah, or Nuh, building the ark. But leap over to Hinduism, and you find King Manu, guided by a giant fish. Travel over to ancient Mesopotamia, and there's Utnapishtim. Go to ancient Greece, and you find Deucalion. Across vastly different ancient worlds, this exact same narrative of a catastrophic, world-ending flood and a massive savior vessel echoed completely independently. It is absolutely mind-blowing when you think about it.
Now, let's switch gears and explore a pretty heavy theological wedge issue, one that still divides people to this very day: physical statues and idolatry. The origin of anti-idolatry in Islam and Judaism traces back to a young, honestly kind of rebellious Abram. According to early texts, he walked right into his father Terah's shop and just smashed all the clay statues. Why would he do that? Well, he wanted to prove a point to the locals. Basically, if these physical objects couldn't even defend themselves from a teenager with a stick, they clearly lacked true divine power.
But there's a common modern misconception here that totally misses the nuance of how idols are actually used in polytheistic faiths. As scholar Acharya Prashanth points out, the literal stone isn't actually the object of worship. Hindus, for example, use the physical idol as a medium. It's a tool to reach the formless God. It's exactly like looking at a cherished photograph of your family, right? You aren't showing love to the actual photographic paper, you are directing your love to what the image represents.
And actually, if we look really closely at Abrahamic texts, we see the commanded use of statues and imagery there as well. In Exodus, God explicitly commands Moses to build a golden mercy seat flanked by cherub idols. Ezekiel describes the Temple of Jerusalem as having these elaborate carvings of cherubs and palm trees. And of course, statues of Jesus and Mary are reverently placed in Christian churches globally. So the point is, religious imagery itself isn't universally forbidden, not when it's used correctly as a focal point to honor God.
This shared root also extends to our linguistic understanding, which, let's be honest, is frequently misunderstood today. Take the word Islam. It simply translates to submission before God. A Muslim is simply one who submits. Interestingly enough, Quran chapter 2 verse 62 actually counts Jews, Christians, and Sabians as believers. Therefore, the heavily charged word kafir, which is rooted in kufr, or disbelief, historically refers strictly to atheistic non-believers who reject God entirely. It doesn't just mean people of other monotheistic faiths.
Furthermore, across the board, these ancient texts warn about a much more insidious form of idolatry. Both the Quran and ancient Hindu texts powerfully warn that the true danger isn't just bowing to stone figures, like, say, the ancient Quraysh tribe's idol Hubal. No, the real danger is idolizing your own material wealth. It's your property, your earthly ego. Elevating your worldly desires above spiritual morality is really seen as the ultimate form of false worship in almost every major tradition.
All right, now let's objectively examine one of the absolute most misunderstood areas across all major texts: verses involving scriptural violence. We are going to look at these completely impartially, just to understand how reading them without their proper historical context can completely change their meaning.
For example, if you read the Hebrew Bible entirely stripped of its ancient, historical context, you will find commands that sound like horrifying calls for total annihilation. Like in 1 Samuel, God commands Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites and everything belonging to them. Now, without understanding the specific, ancient wartime context of the Israelites at that time, verses like this sound incredibly jarring, right?
Similarly, Jesus Christ is globally recognized as this ultimate figure of peace. Yet, look at his words here in the Gospel of Matthew, claiming he came to bring a sword, not peace. Taken literally and entirely out of context, it sounds violently disruptive. It completely contradicts his broader spiritual message. You really have to understand the metaphorical meaning behind the text here.
And over in Hinduism, we see the exact same phenomenon. Lord Krishna's advice to the warrior Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita tells him that warriors should be happy when fighting comes to them. Now, this is a deeply philosophical text about inner conflict and cosmic duty, yet it has been deliberately twisted out of context over the years to justify completely unrelated, modern conflicts.
And finally, we look at highly controversial verses like this one from the Quran. Taken entirely alone, it reads like a terrifying mandate, and because of that lack of context, it is constantly hijacked by modern terrorist groups. They use it to brainwash followers into committing horrific acts against innocent people today.
So the crucial takeaway here is simply this. Context is king. Literally, none of these scriptures demand blind, perpetual violence against your neighbors. These verses are deeply, intrinsically tied to highly specific historical situations. Krishna is speaking during the great, defining Mahabharata war. The Quranic verses refer to literal, immediate defensive battles against the attacking Quraysh tribe in the 7th century. Stripping the history away just leaves a very dangerous vacuum.
Okay, let's conclude by charting the exact historical divergence of the Abrahamic faiths, just to see how closely bound they really are. So, from Abraham and his wife Sarah, we get Isaac. He leads to Jacob, who is renamed Israel, forming the roots of Judaism. From that exact same lineage of Isaac comes Jesus, forming the foundation of Christianity. And from Abraham and his second wife Hagar, we get Ishmael, who travels to Mecca, laying the ancestral foundation for Islam. 3 massive global branches, but literally one single family tree.
Knowing all of this, seeing the shared flood myths, the mutual warnings against ego and wealth, and a family tree that literally binds half the planet together, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. If our foundational stories, our moral frameworks, and our historical roots are this profoundly identical, why do we allow fear to convince us that we're sworn enemies? Something to think about until next time.